everybody. It's Martin Kiernan here, and this week's Infection Control Matters podcast is going to be in two parts. First, Phil Russo, Brett Mitchell, and I are going to have a little bit of chat about a paper on urinary tract infections. And then later, I'm going to be talking to one of the authors of the study as a bit of a follow-up because we were interested to know about the sustainability of this piece of work. So first, it'll be Brett, Phil, and I having a chat, and then we'll get on to talking to Catherine from the United States of America.
Hey folks, and welcome to the next edition of Infection Control Matters. Great to be joined by Martin and Brett once again, and we're following on from our previous episode talking about urinary tract infections and catheters, and we're going to chat about a paper that's been published in Critical Care Nurse called Entering a No Diaper Zone, Rethinking Prevention of Catheter-Associated Urinary Tract Infection, with the lead author being Katie Cabral. Interesting little QI activity, this one, single site, so very limited, I guess, as to perhaps its inferences, but certainly the use of catheters and diapers was interesting. This is in a pediatric ICU.
Yeah, and so for those who don't use the term diapers, of course, we're talking about nappies. Yes. And we actually had a chat about nappies versus diapers before we got onto this podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, by the by, you like this one too, Martin, didn't you, this paper?
Yeah, I'd like quality improvement projects because, this is an organisation that's clearly trying to do something, and they've done a number of different things at the same time. So this is no way an RCT or anything like that, but it is potentially hypothesis generating, which is what I like about it. Because I like
a good quality improvement program. Yeah, when they're well described in the literature or in conferences, it's often that practical element of something that someone's done and usually if it's presented, it's worked. So actually, it'd be good to see more in conferences. I digress a bit, but about things that don't work because we can waste time doing things. But it's funny, you never get a successful conference abstract for something that doesn't work, unless it's a big trial or something. But it's often the things that don't work are just as interesting as the things that do work. Otherwise, we're just all wasting our time doing things that don't work and not sharing.
Run concurrent sessions, but trials that did work and trials that didn't work.
You know what? I recken this is a concurrent session from a future conference theme. The trials that don't work, that didn't work. Or the QI projects that didn't show a difference or failed. And why did they fail? Yeah.
Why? It's why they failed.
It's why they failed is the key.
Was it the intervention? Was it actually the intervention or was it the implementation?
Yeah, that's right.
Because I've got a lot of failed implementations that probably in theory should have worked. So that's a
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to nappies. Yes. So who's telling us about this one? Is it you, Martin, or Phil?
Oh, Martin, you might have a better grasp of this than I do.
Yeah, well, this is a pediatric intensive care unit, quite a large one, 56 bed in Georgia in southeastern United States. Yeah, and they were looking at catheter-associated urinary tract infections, and they were looking at bundles, etc., etc. And there was a recurrent pattern because they were doing post-CAUTI huddles, which I think is a really good thing to do, but they're also looking at what's going on. And during these huddles, the group just identified there was a recurrent pattern of documented liquid stool occurring in patients with CAUTI. Therefore, they were thinking, okay, possibly it's the catheter contamination from stool contributing to infection rates. So they developed this PDSA cycle with the epidemiologist who works with them in the organization. And I would say also, when you look at this paper, all of them are clinical nurses working in this area. So this is a unit that's decided we're going to do something about this. So that's what I like. And they've got a epidemiologist working in the organization. So this isn't an academic university unit doing a formally designed study. This seems to be a practical problem. So let's see if we can do something about it. So the epidemiologist said, okay, let's say completely removing the diapers or the nappies for patients in pediatric ICU who've got indwelling urine catheters. And so they brought this no diaper zone. And get around the problem, clearly there's going to be some liquid stool around. They put the patients on highly absorbent pads, but there was monitoring for stool every 2 hours during the usual vital sign checks and position changes as well, which meant it was recognised quite promptly, reducing prolonged exposure. But a lot of the liquid stool, and it's often very liquid at that age, is getting absorbed into the pad anyway, rather than a nappy sitting there with a load of liquid stool sitting around the catheter. So I thought this was just a simple, practical.
Oh, there's a problem.
Yeah, well, it is. Do you know what? Infection prevention is so much common sense, though, isn't it? Oh, well, it should be.
There's lots of things that are common sense.
That
a lot of things that are common sense in this world is not very common.
I mean, they did do a couple of other things as well. They brought in a different urine monitoring system as well, which involved a catheter with a sensor in it. Which actually addresses things like urine backflow and stagnation, and so it replaces traditional gravity-fed bags. So there's gentle suction and three-way valves, which is actually potentially could help with the previous problem, which was a large residual. But I don't think that's been formally studied in this sort of setting. So there's a couple of things going on here. They have a bundle, they look at the compliance rates, but there's the no diaper, which for me has a lot of logic, and the Accurine system, which is a highly technological system. So you've got a really low-tech problem solver and a very high-tech. I'd like to do a cost-effectiveness analysis on those, because I suspect removing the nappies would actually make it cheaper anyway, and adding in an expensive catheter will make it a lot more expensive. So there's another hypothesis generator there as well.
Yeah, fascinating.
I think the other neat thing about this activity, Martin, was that it was very much multidisciplinary, and there was a lot of intentional effort, daily meetings, roundings, reviewing the option or possibility to remove the catheter as soon as possible. So there was quite a bit of intensive activity around this particular project, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a unit that's highly engaged in quality improvement. They actually result by eliminating the nappies and switching to pads. Their CAUTI rate went over 3 per 1,000 days down to 0, and that was sustained for 500 plus days. So something's going on there, I suspect.
And that 500 days was over a year, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, given that 365 days is a year, yes. Fantastic. That's our stats guru there, helping us out with that
evening, one. I know that they did use some the plan. The PDSA methodology to plan to start a study act model to inform this, and so it just shows again that something simple like that, when you put it in place locally, it can have a really powerful effect.
Now, the thing is, could this be transferable to adult ICU or longer term facilities, or certainly adult ICU, where often you don't want people to have a formed solid stool, so you're almost generating, trying to encourage a liquid stool in a critical care patient. Should they? How is their feces management maintained? I don't know. I don't.
Because most of them will have urinary catheters in.
Yes, they will. For urinary output monitoring. So, and do we look at stool management in CAUTI prevention guidelines? I don't think I've ever actually seen that, apart from stopping constipation, which is going to cause you to have a catheter. I don't think I've ever seen it mentioned in CAUTI prevention guideline.
I guess that's probably
no evidence. Yeah.
There's probably other factors at play in an adult ICU, though. I'm sort of thinking, without being graphic, the volume of the volume of feces might be different, and also I guess there would be age-related factors potentially at play. We know age is an important risk factor for UTIs, so I get that there might be other things there that are at play in an adult setting, but nonetheless, it still makes you think about other alternatives to currently what we do, and feeds on from the discussion we had in our last podcast about contamination of extraluminal contamination and cleaning the catheter site, etc., and what difference that would make. Perhaps even more so in the context of someone where they're wearing a nappy. maybe that's something that needs to go into the model that we talked about in our last podcast. Yeah, interesting to see.
Yeah, I do wonder about any potential barriers, because they didn't really talk about this. Did it increase nurse workload, or about family acceptance as well? Because you'd have to explain to the family we're actually not going to put a nappy or diaper on the baby. We're just going to allow it to pass stool into this pad. Was there explanations given to the family? I'd be interested to know how that particularly went as well. And but sometimes it's about balancing things that cost nothing versus something that's very high cost. Because I know in some parts of the world they're always after a high cost intervention. Here's a new shiny piece of tech. Because actually going back to basics could almost or even be much more important. So I thought that was nice.
Could be some.
It'd be wonderful to hear how. Maybe we should have got the authors on, because it would be good to hear. I mean, obviously this was recently published, but and had that 1.5 year window that they reported on. But it'd be interesting to see what their reflections are, because it's presumably, oh, there we go. It was back in 2021, I think. So it'd be interesting to see if that's still continued and whether any of those things that you talked about, Martin.
It is worth it, and I might see if I can get in touch and just see if I can add a little addendum onto the podcast, because this, I wonder if it is more sustainable, because this is a unit-driven, nurse-led innovation. So they've seen a problem themselves and they've implemented their own solution, rather than a research team come in from XYZ university, do a research study, and then head off again out with their results and their findings, or just published in a nice journal, and everybody's happy. And in the meantime, the people on the ward are gone, thank God that's over, we're going back to what we did before. So it will be really interesting to know that.
None of the authors label themselves, identifies infection prevention staff. They're all critical care nurses and epidemiologists. So nurse scientists. So interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well, great chatting, gents, about this really interesting QI project, and hopefully everyone at home enjoyed that as well.
And if you're doing a good QI project, please write it up.
Oh yeah, okay? Write it up.
This is a really good example. Yeah, write it up, because everybody gets to learn from something like that, and it will generate a hypothesis for possibly some university groups saying, "Okay, let's go and do a proper study of this." Because it would be nice to work out what it is, because one is cheap and one is not.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Phil. Great chatting.
Thanks, Brett. Ciao.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of Infection Control Matters.
Well, hi again, everybody. It's Martin Kiernan, and I managed to track down one of the authors of the study we've just been chatting about, and I'm going to be talking to Katie Cabral, who works at the Quality Department at the Children's Healthcare Atlanta, Georgia. Katie, what was the background of this study? Because this is very much a bottom-up study, how did you guys recognize there was something that you needed to take some action on? Because often you get the infection prevention team going in, or the preventionist going in, say, we think you've got a problem, but you're identifying this one yourself, aren't you?
Right. So it was really a partnership with infection prevention, but we were still continuing to have these CAUTIs come up, and we were doing all the things, the bundles, and we were rounding. So we were really trying to put our heads together and figure out what is next. What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? And so we really started to look at what the nurses were saying. We went to the bedside and asked questions, talked with them, gathered some information through surveys, just to figure out maybe they had some insights that we weren't getting to. There were questions that maybe we weren't asking. And that's when we noticed this trend in nurses reporting, well, there was maybe lots of stool or bowel issues that were maybe affecting how they cleaned the catheter or how often they would have to clean the catheter. So then we started to look into, okay, that's interesting. We have a couple nurses who were saying the same type of thing. Let's think outside the box. What can we do? And someone just had this crazy idea of, let's just take the diaper off. Yeah, and it starts with a crazy idea.
I've got choirs of angels singing here now. The thought of people going to the people actually doing the job, saying, "What do you think's going on?" as opposed to a research going, "Here's a theory, but let's test it." So this is much nicer,
and it really helps with the buy-in because we have this crazy idea to do this thing no one does. But it came from what the nurses were telling us. So I think that really helped be able to really implement this crazy idea because we partnered with them right off the bat.
You say crazy idea, but actually there's a lot of logic behind it, isn't there?
Definitely, definitely.
Now, you implemented two solutions, didn't you? You implemented a high-tech solution, which was the particular catheter which stops you getting high residual in the bladder, but also the very low-tech solution of taking the diaper off.
Yeah, so I think hand in hand, really, we started with the no diapers, then we shortly after kind of started the trial of the Accurine drain. So I think those things together is really what led to our success. I wouldn't say one thing or the other. So yeah, it was this really cool thing that we trialed with the Accurine drain, being able to like pull urine from the bladder using like a suction. So there's no stagnation when you're moving patients, especially pediatric patients who move around, toddlers. There's no backflow. It made a lot of sense to pair the two.
Yeah, because interestingly, in the paper we discussed in the last episode was looking at what are the risk factors for long and short-term catheters. And in short-term catheters, seem to be migration up the outside of the catheter. But in long-term catheterization, it's the pooling and the stagnation in the bladder. How long would your patients be in with you? Would you class these as long or short-term catheters in your particular unit?
Long-term.
Okay.
In order to trial the Accurine, they would have to have a Foley catheter for 72 hours, and that's when we would transition them. So we would first want to make sure that we're not going to be removing this next day. This is something we're going to be using for a little while. Yeah, and that was one of the criteria for using it.
Did you get buy-in from all the staff about the removing of the diaper, or there's some who clearly spotted this may be an issue? Others, were there any pushbacks from either other staff or family members about leaving the baby without a diaper on? And we say nappy, by the way. We use the word nappy in our previous podcast quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely mixed reviews at first. We had some people who really supported the idea, thought it was something to try, it would maybe work, and some people who were pretty skeptical. So it really was a matter of just going to the families or to those nurses and hearing their concerns, explaining our reasoning and logic behind it, and really wanting to try it. And if it doesn't work, we want that feedback. We want to do something that's going to be helpful and work. So if it's not working, let us know. We can pivot, trial something else. And I think just giving a platform to kind of share their concerns and saying, look, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else, was really the reassurance that they needed. And I think that helped get over that hump of this is something new, but let's see.
But this is also clearly a unit that is desperately trying to improve things for patients as well. So the parents must have got a sense of that. That must have given them a nice bit of confidence as well. So clearly the results speak for themselves, because you went from 3, I think, per 1,000 catheter days to 0 and maintained it for a while up until the time of the paper. Has that continued?
It has continued. We still use the Accurine. We still have a no diaper policy. We have had 2 events in the last year. And so right now we're kind of looking at what's occurring, what's changing, what's happening. And of course, like a lot of other hospitals, we have a lot of new staff, a lot of turnover. So maybe just re-engaging that education piece and getting back out there and saying, this is why we do what we do, would be helpful in the transition back.
Yeah, turnover is always difficult, isn't it? I mean, how do you monitor compliance with this? Do you actually have it as it part of your checklist now, or part of your bundle, that there is no diaper and after 72 hours consider for Accurine? And did the 2 events happen in patients who had the Accurine, or is it in the pre-Accurine phase? I was interested in as well.
The 2 patients that it happened in did have the Accurine, but we did note that they had diapers on, or nappies, but they were open. They were left open, but it was still underneath the patient. So we were thinking maybe that played a role.
Okay. And so you're continuing the policy. That's really great, because this is not a question of doing a research project and then forgetting all about it. Unfortunately, this would never get included in a guideline, would it? And because I've looked at a number of, I'm doing a systematic review at the moment on catheters, interestingly, and there's no mention of diapers, nappies, or any form of continence projects. Is this a risk for catheter-associated urinary traction at all, infection at all? Because and that's what piqued my interest on this. Is this a hypothesis generating piece of work, do you think, for somebody to actually, let's do an RCT on this, a diaper and no diaper, with the consistency in other parts of practice? Because I recognize you're trying to do a lot in this quality improvement project, so you've done two things at the same time. Do you think there's an opportunity there?
That is definitely what our intention is. That would be the goal. We want to, share it, see if it works for other people, get it out there. Maybe it's something for other people to think about, adding to some guidelines if we can get, the data behind it.
I mean, that might be a little bit more difficult for you to do because you'd actually be going backwards on your practice. And so you might get more pushback from staff to say, actually, we've solved a problem. Why are we going to deliberately give ourselves a problem again? But It certainly is something maybe somebody might want to look at if they haven't gone down this route. There's an opportunity here, I think, to take over one or two parts of that protocol and see where it goes.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I was fascinated, and I was desperately keen to find out if you're continuing, and you are. So that's even better, because this proves that nurse-led, bottom-up innovation works, and we love that. We absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much. We were really proud of it.
Thank you.